All right, good people, beautiful people, welcome back to Peeling the Onion. My name is Elvar Freyr, coming directly at you from Reykjavik, Iceland. Welcome. We have a very special guest, Mr. Joe Lally of the legendary Fugazi, one of the most cited and influential bands of all time, both politically and musically. Since Fugazi went on what they called indefinite hiatus in 2002, he's been making music and collaborating with lots of people, amongst others John Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. These days he's playing in Coriky alongside Ian Mackaye from Fugazi and his wife Amy. And he's also playing in a band called the Messthetics with his old friend Brandon Canty, the drummer from Fugazi. They're just releasing an album now on the 15th of March with jazz saxophonist James Brandon Lewis. And the new single is out. It's called Emergence. You can check it out on YouTube or Spotify or whatever you get your music from, Bandcamp. It's good, really good stuff. So I'm excited to hear the album. The Messthetics are going out on tour for you guys who live on the east coast of the United States. It's gonna start on March 21st in Idaho, go down to Tennessee, Georgia, and North Carolina, and up to DC and end in Pennsylvania. They're gonna start again on April 5th in Pennsylvania, go up to Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, and do some dates in Canada, and come down through Massachusetts and end in the Bowery Ballroom in New York on April the 19th. So if you guys are around that area, you should definitely go check that out. I guess that's all I have to say. I could tell you that Joe has bass lessons. He mentioned his bass lessons. You can find him on Instagram at joelally898. The number's 898. Great music theory. I did those classes back in 2021, and it's great music theory. And also just to pick Joe's brain about whatever. He does these things through Skype. My Instagram is Peeling the Onion Pod. You can check that out for updates on upcoming guests, or if you want to leave me a message. And yeah, let's just get it on. Mr. Joe Lally from Fugazi. All right, so what's up, man? How you been?
Been okay. Just been trying to get out and play when the Messthetics are able to do it. We finally have a record coming out, so we're going to do that this year. And, teaching as much as I can get students to meet with me.
Right. Are you having a hard time getting students? I find that hard to believe.
It manages to balance itself out. I had a lot of people held hostage during COVID, and that's when I started. So a lot of those people, they kind of got back to their lives. So it's not quite like it was before, and it dips a little more in the summer and in the winter, like summer vacation, sort of Christmas, holiday time. But it really is completely up in the air. It just, people are there when they're able to be there, and I'm keeping enough students to like maintain. So it's kind of awesome.
Okay. I heard the new single. It's makes me really excited for the new record.
Oh, good. Great. That's yeah, we had James join us for I think 3 live shows when we were in the Brooklyn or New York City area. We had him get up and join us for some songs. And that is because Anthony, our guitar player, had played with James going way back to 2014. And so they developed, a musical relationship that for them was pretty natural. They understood each other and complemented each other musically very well. And so Anthony said, I think it was Jazz Fest 2019 in New York, Winter Jazz Fest. And we invited him up to do a song. And it just felt very easy and really good. It wasn't a bad fit at all. It was just a natural, like really complementary fit. So we were like, that was cool. And then when the opportunity came up, we did other shows in the area with him. And then he invited us to record a track on his record called the Jessup Wagon. And
Is that the Fear Not song?
yeah.
Okay.
And that was because we were about to play in Brooklyn at Union Pool, and he was going to join us for that show. So he said, why don't you come up the day before in time to go into the studio in late afternoon? And so we went into, what's his name? Shahzadi Shmali's studio. And we recorded that song with him, literally not really hearing the song until we met him at the studio.
Okay.
But Anthony convinced us, like, it's just like playing some chords over and over, like, and there were no changes in it. It was just that we were supposed to keep, rocking this chord change. So that was like sort of simple enough to do. It's always nice for me to have more time, but he was happy with how it went down. And again, it was an easy thing to do. And then we played that song with him at the end of our set the next day. It was like, okay, it's just four chords. And then that was an easy thing to do. So he joined us for like three of our songs, and then we played that with him. And I think that was the point where we just felt, especially after the experience in the studio, like this kind of thing we were feeling anyway, that Anthony was always talking about inviting another soloist into the idea of the Messthetics. And James was just such a likely choice that after that experience, the new set of material that we were writing, and this is all after COVID, where we lost our practice space and Anthony spent a year away, and we just went through a lot of time not doing too much, that now we were getting back to writing a record. And having James in mind just gave us a whole different perspective about what that music could be. And we started to direct things, in that vein of like, we're going to have this other person soloing on saxophone in this. So songs were written with a bass, but not a completely locked down outline. And they allowed for James to step in and write melodies and determine how it would work, shall we say. And in November of 2022, we brought him down to record the songs in the studio, and he brought one song with him. And we'd had 2 days in the studio, and then the third day we went and did a show at a local jazz club, and that was kind of everything. The day before the 2 days in the studio, he actually came over, and we are recording in my we're rehearsing in my basement, and so we kind of ran through the songs with him the day before. That was it. Yeah.
You recorded that album in a day, right? Yeah.
That was 2 days. The 2 days in the studio. It was a Sunday and a Monday, and Tuesday we played the show. We played all the songs at the show.
Nice. Sounds great. Is it like a, full album of material? Like, what's the running time?
Yeah, it's like, 40 whatever minutes, It's an LP.
Do you have some drawn out freakouts? Because the new single is just like very condensed. Do you have like some wailing freakouts on the new album?
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, I think we push it, and I think it I think we made a nice balanced, we kind of brought in different ideas, and I kind of brought in an old idea of mine, finally made sense when I could, envision James as part of it. Suddenly, something I didn't really understand that I had written suddenly made so much more sense. And it wasn't such a dirgy, like some kind of a bummer of a song. It actually was more pleasant sounding. And I was able to bring that in.
Nice.
And and it just worked out. And it was all really good in the studio. It was nice.
Are you guys gonna tour Europe anytime?
We are basically where, I think a lot of that booking is based on people hearing the record and getting to know the record. I think it's unfortunately the record's coming out in March, and I think we're just kind of late for this year. You know what I mean? People are already booking. They're already booking for next year, honestly. So I'm hoping that the cycle will be that the record comes out, people get to know it in the next 4 or 5 months, and then they start to like, if they like it, that's all it ever really is. If people really think what you're doing is worth hearing and seeing and so forth, then they'll ask you in. So hopefully we're going to get those kind of bookings for next year. I think we're doing Primavera, and there might be something else, but yeah, I think it's just the way it works is that we're just a little late for this year,
Right.
but hopefully we'll get 2025.
Awesome. So let's wind it back about what, 60 years, shall we?
Okay.
So you're born in Silver Spring. That's in Maryland, right?
Yeah.
It's basically DC, isn't it? Like it's like
It's like 20 minutes. Yeah, it's like 20 minutes north of DC.
did you live there for a while or were you just born there and then you grew up in Rockville or how was that?
Yeah, it's literally like the hospital, like Rockville, even where I grew up was not tech. I mean, it's the zip code is Rockville, but it's almost like I'm in between two. There's like the city sort of Bethesda, which is also mostly, suburban and residential. And then there's Rockville, which does have a little downtown. Bethesda and Rockville have downtowns, but I'm kind of closer to Rockville in between the two.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And literally just, blocks of houses surrounded by some roads and some strip malls and shit. I mean, it's really like it was a harsh place for me to grow up in because it just had that feeling. I think that kind of thing either makes you feel isolated and you have to escape, or you're okay with it. And it just kind of the only thing available in my neighborhood was literally every drug you could possibly look for. So as I grew up, I unfortunately gravitated towards that. But but yeah, it's just a, innocuous suburb that I grew up in, and eventually moved into the city. But I think I moved down the street from my parents, so I lived in the same neighborhood when I lived in my first group house with a bunch of guitar players. The guitar player from The Obsessed, Wino, the guitar player from Death Row, which was also Pentagram, Victor Griffin, and the guitar player from a band called Asylum that was later called Unorthodox. And that was Dale Flood. And that was a crazy house.
So what was your favorite drug back in the day?
I guess, I guess other than smoking a lot of pot, I started to get, I had a nice connection for this speed. So, so I was taking a lot of that and drinking, but I did enjoy the occasional psychedelic of mushrooms or LSD. When I found some very pure LSD, I was kind of surprised because I realized that the shit I took when I was, 15 and 16 was actually full of some kind of weird amphetamine of some kind, and just strange to have both of those things going on at once was a little,
That's a bad mix.
yeah, it's not so good.
This is before you got into punk rock. This is like, how old are you around that time?
Yeah, so around, I mean, I kind of started all those things when I was 13, and then kind of sampled everything by the time I was 15, and still, yeah, still kind of doing all these things. But through high school, I that's when I discovered punk rock. In junior high school, I tried to understand what classic rock was all about, like what hard rock was. For that, from like 9 and 10 years old, I really only listened to like Black American music, R&B, soul, and funk. The big bands for me were like Sly and the Family Stone, James Brown, Otis Redding, Parliament Funkadelic, Ohio Players, and just all the stuff that was, on the radio then, Cool and the Gang. But like 10 or 11 years old, there were these matinees out in Maryland at a venue that's no longer there. That was a small venue because I don't remember it being that big, even though I was young at the time. It wasn't enormous to me, and it was in the round, so the stage would spin slowly. Um, but I saw a lot of like bands that I would hear on the radio, like the Spinners and the OJs, and the I saw the Isley Brothers and the Jackson Five, all around 73, 74.
Did you gravitate towards this because it was the only thing that you were being exposed to, or it was just the thing that really, struck a chord with you?
It was the thing that really hit home for me. It meant the most to me. It happened to be because I wasn't there were not a lot of black, residents in my area at all. So it just turned out that my next door neighbor's family was just very much into music. There were four boys in the family, and my close friend, was my age that I went to school with. And so it was his older brothers listening to all this stuff. So we had access to all this stuff. And the first thing I really got into was Otis Redding's Try a Little Tenderness that was on the live, Monterey record that had Jimi Hendrix on one side, Otis Redding on the other. Yeah. That was the first thing that I really like started to listen to over and over that kind of just really I didn't even understand what was going on. But then they had singles by James Brown that were just like hanging on the wall and shit. So we'd listen to like um, Goodfoot, Get on the Goodfoot, songs like that we'd be able to put on the single and listen to. And it was just like music from another planet. It just so totally captivated me that I don't know, I was just completely moved by that shit. And then there was a show on TV, Soul Train, that you saw all the popular music, of the time, black music, and then people, mostly black music, I should say, and then people dancing to that, and that was something that I got into. And I literally watched all the shows that were like sort of black American television. I watched all that stuff and I went and saw the movies that were black movies. I just, it's really, I don't know why, but that was the culture that meant anything to me. And as a result, I think I felt somewhat isolated from what most of my peers were doing. I just felt somewhat ostracized and outside of a lot of that. You have to take into consideration that my father's parents came over from Ireland and my mother's parents came over from Italy. My grandmother on my mother's side, was still alive through my, like, even through my teens, we were still going to visit her, once a week or something. And she barely spoke English. And so I'm a second generation American. And to me, I just understood very much. I'm like, all of these Black Americans have been here more than likely a hell of a lot longer than my family has. And they are not on equal footing with what's going on in this country. So it's something that was just on my mind, when I was younger, and I felt very, very strangely about that because I also wasn't necessarily part of that. I wasn't around a lot of, Black America, and I wasn't being invited into the world of Black America. Why would I be? And so it was strange, but it also ended up sort of connecting me after going through like hard rock in junior high school. I kind of took, the heavy stuff, the Hendrix and the Sabbath and Zeppelin, and kind of disregarded most of the rest, and then was very ready for punk rock to come along. And punk rock was kind of similar to being into, R&B and soul and funk. It was something that most people didn't understand that were around me to even talk about. And so it was kind of this secret that you had, and you understood other people through that.
So what, like, how did you get into it? Do you remember like an album you heard, a show that you saw, like that really cemented your interest in it?
Well, a common thread seems to be here is this feeling of isolating. And again, I felt isolated going into high school because my neighborhood was bused to Wheaton High School, and I went to a closer high school in Kensington, Maryland, called Albert Einstein High School. And that really, again, threw me into a situation where I didn't know anybody, but it had an art program that you could take for 3 periods for like what is, amounted to like half the day. And I was recommended by my junior high school art teacher. And, so I go into this class and I'm going, I don't really know anyone in the school except the guy in my neighborhood who I hung out with, but he's older than me. So we're not sharing any classes or anything. And he literally didn't even go to class. He was a total fuck up who I introduced to the Obsessed, and he later became the drummer.
Okay.
And that's when I go into that art class and I meet the drummer from the Obsessed. He's in my art class. But it takes me a couple of years almost to even go see his band. He's telling us about his band, but it's not until 1980 that I see his band because it doesn't make any sense to me. He's like they're playing like heavy, heavy metal sort of music, but they're also doing some punk covers like the Sex Pistols and the Damned and the Saints. And I was like, I don't even understand what you're talking about, And I didn't know that much about what was going on locally. So, in other words, I'm introduced to punk rock in that art class. And that's by a guy who I become friends with, Ivan Martinez. And Ivan is just taking in everything. And he's listening to this local station, WGTB, that is a college radio station in Georgetown University. And this is just before they sell all the equipment to the studio and take it apart because it's being it's so run by the students and they're so crazy and subversive that they get rid of the station. So they get rid of the station in 1979 and they have a benefit show for the station that I didn't see. That is the Cramps and the Urban Verbs and a band called the Chumps. And I remember it being advertised because Ivan was taping the music being played on the station, and I could get it in at my house. And if I drove to this parking lot nearby, I could pick it up on my car radio.
So what were they playing? Like, what were the predominant bands?
They were playing like all punk and shit, and then they would also play like, dub and reggae, but they were playing all the punk music, so we were learning about, they were playing the Bad Brains single. But I didn't even understand the music, for example, that was on Discord Records at that time. So here it is, 1979, and I'm listening to punk rock, but I don't even really understand what's going on in DC. We're going in to see bands, but they're like, national bands, or international, but we went and saw like the Plastics from Japan. We went and saw, we would see like Iggy Pop coming through in 1980, and we saw Devo in Baltimore in 79 and the Clash in 79. And then we're going to see just whatever sort of local happens to be playing at the club. But the hardcore guys are like younger and they're not playing those night shows. Although when I do see the Cramps in 1980, that the Teen Idols open for them. But the Teen Idols, to me, at that point, I've already listened to the Sex Pistols, but I've also already understood that Lydon has moved on and started Public Image. So I'm kind of like, what is this?
You didn't like the Teen Idols?
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even understand them. I'm like, isn't that over?
Yeah, okay.
It's just like showing my ignorance that I was, I'm listening to like I'm totally into like Joy Division, the Ramones, different things I can get my hands on. There was a Live at the Def Club record that I've had that was so cool because it had the Dead Kennedys, but I didn't understand the Dead Kennedys connection to the local DC scene. I didn't understand any of this. We
Right.
went to see the Bad Brains in 1979 and they didn't play. It was at the place that they lived at, this squatted house called Madam's Organ in the Adams Morgan neighborhood. And they just didn't play that night. And actually, Ian got up with a guitar player, Dave Byers. I remember the two of them playing something, just making up music, but it's literally just in a house in DC. And Ivan used to live down the street from that house. So he knew about this venue and took us there to see that. And then the Bad Brains didn't play. And it took me like another year to actually see the Bad Brains and understand the connection in the scene. It just took me so being from Rockville was like I was from another planet. I just did not even understand what was going on.
You didn't have anyone to sit you down and be like, hey, so this is the deal, like.
There was no one from DC who was conveying any of this information. Everything I understood was through Ivan, who was picking up a lot of shit, but it was from like the record stores we would go to and hearing what he could on WGTB, but WGTB closed in 1979. The Cramps show was a total riot. Everyone started throwing shit. And I mean, Lux came out on stage. The first thing that happened is he threw up all over the stage, and someone had to come out and clean it up because they were slipping in it.
Like, but there were no like fan scenes around that time coming out of DC.
There was not so much that we could get a hold of. So all we could do, we could function off of like picking up flyers on things. But I was missing a lot of that information and I didn't know about it. So I'd go see like, the Psychedelic Furs and, different bands that I liked that were coming through town. But it took until I mean, I remember really understanding it when I saw the Dead Kennedys, but that might have even been later in 82. But before that, I saw the Obsessed open for the Dead Boys. And that was the first time I saw the Obsessed. I think that might have been the first show, or I might have gone to see them in a little club before that, I think. But they played with the Dead Boys, and that's when I saw this punk audience, like they were giving shit to the Obsessed because the Obsessed had long hair, and they were dressed almost like in this weird metally, glammy sort of dark way. The Obsessed did not fit in. Okay. But the audience that was giving them shit was also kind of digging it and going, fuck, they do this really well. Because they had this insane singer, Vance Bacchus. And he was a real like showman, and he was just very physical, like a Stiv Bators or an Iggy Pop kind of performer who was totally exciting to see as a local performer. So I'm hanging out with those guys at their house and stuff and going to see every show that they're playing. And part of it is just to see what's going to happen because Vance is crazy, right? So when the Dead Boys see them, Stiv Bators is so into Vance that they go back to their house in Wheaton with him and hang out with them, just to hang out with them. And after that, Stiv Bators does Lords of the News Church, and he is dressed like Vance Bacchus. He has a cut off leather, like cut off sleeves. He's got bandanas like kind of wrapped around him in different places. That's totally Vance's look at the time. Anyway, so that's when I see like the punk audience kind of for the first time. I'm aware that there's this particular crowd. But then as time goes on, I realize these kids I'm seeing at shows, they're all at this show of the Dead Kennedys, and they're just the whole time they're fucking jumping off the stage, like getting on stage, jumping off, on, off, like the whole fucking time they're doing the show. It's completely crazy to me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's so weird. And it's kind of violent and it's kind of fucked up for me because now it looks like high school and it looks a little bit like jock oriented. Before that, I kind of thought the whole punk scene was embracing everybody, and it was totally like okay with the gay situation, the gay crowd and everything. My best friend, Ivan, who's turning me on to all this music is gay, you know, and like it just was so weird when it sort of hit that point of really understanding hardcore. I got into it because all these people are putting out their own records, and some of them are like younger than me. And I'm like, what? How is this all happening? It totally blew my mind. But it was also kind of, except for a few bands, it was also very similar. All the music sounded very much alike. So, other than like the Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, Black Flag, the Bad Brains, those are the bands I was really getting into. And then I just didn't have so much money that I was just buying everything I ever heard of. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'd have to hear things. So there was things I liked, but I just didn't know so much about, Flipper and bands like the Minutemen. I was hearing, but I just couldn't just like go out and buy all that shit. But I was taking it in and enjoying it.
So was it something you heard that prompted you to start playing instruments? Do
So
you remember a turning point?
yeah, I didn't pick up the bass until 1983. But I think I first started imagining that I could be in a band, and because my friend Eddie, who ended up playing in the Obsessed, because he had a drum set, I probably thought I could keep a beat on drums because I could always mess around on his drums. And I even tried out for this local band 9353 once, but that didn't go anywhere when they needed a drummer for one moment. And I kind of thought that maybe I could do that. And the first other band that I tried to be in, I probably tried to sing with some guys in my neighborhood, and that, we never played a show or anything. And then we could barely even, practice a few times, try and write anything. And after that, that's when it became really clear. So between 79 and 83, I finally have my reason. But yeah, in 79, I think it was listening to Pink Section this band from San Francisco that's on the Live at the Def Club record, and they had their own record out that I ended up with and single. And that was a band that I was like, shit, I can do this, kind of music. But it was listening to Joy Division and Public Image that I think really made me see the role of the bass as something that I really understood in music, and that I could work that in, because somehow in my mind I related it back to R&B and funk. And even though it might be related in some way, I wouldn't have been able to prove it to you at all. But I felt that I understood the thread of its connection to the music.
Mm.
The reason I really picked up a bass is a friend from high school who was younger than me, had gone away to school and was home during a holiday, and we both ended up at a Minor Threat show, and Ian had really lost his voice, and the whole crowd was singing that show. And we came out of that show, and we were like, he wasn't even singing his songs, man. That was insane. And I mean, they wrote really good songs, so we didn't really consider that. But Peter was like, we should start a band. I'll sing. And I said, okay, I'll play bass. That's literally how it started. I went out because I had a good job at that time and made decent money for a government contractor. I just went out and bought a bass, an amp, and a cabinet, and I didn't even know like what the fuck I was doing. I made like some weird choices, bought a huge cabinet with 415s in it. It was enormous, but for me, that's what it had to be. It had to be this like monolithic fucking bass sound.
Sure.
So totally ridiculous. But anyway, that's how we started. And I learned to play bass by writing songs with Peter. And either he was putting together notes or I was trying to. And together we just wrote song after song. And I went back to someone I knew from junior high school who played guitar, and I went and got him to play guitar. And Peter knew a drummer. And that band played two shows. We were called Lunchbox, and we played someone's house party. And we played for the drummer's mother's art opening. The first show was at a hair salon where her art was being shown. So we really played for a bunch of adults in a hair
Okay.
salon.
Okay. How did they take you?
They enjoyed it.
Nice.
They were like, "Oh, that's very nice. Her son's music is being played." They were totally awesome. It was in like a hippie neighborhood, and so maybe they were hippies. I don't know.
But that didn't go anywhere, obviously.
No, that was yeah, that was a band that managed to play two shows. We broke up, and Peter and I found another guitar player and another drummer and started another band called Pitbull, and that band played two shows. And again, it was my own house party because you got to figure out how to play a show. And then there was a Chinese restaurant called King Kong in the universe near the University of Maryland where I was living in that area, College Park. And that venue, like they had like sort of they were a place that had a dance floor in the middle of the restaurant. So like they'd have tables set up for the restaurant. When the restaurant closed, they'd have like dance nights and have people, DJ, and then they would have bands. And so we played there.
And did you start other bands after that, or did you just feel resigned that
Um,
like things weren't
I
working
kept
out?
trying. I
Yeah.
kept trying to do music. I moved into a house. The house I lived in during that time got raided by the police, but I was away at work. That's a very long story.
Okay.
But everyone went to jail, basically. They all got busted except me because I was at work. But anyway, I escaped all that. I go to another house out in Silver Spring and I befriended Bubba from the band Void, Bubba Dupree. And I literally had just gone up to him at a show and said, "Hey man, if you want to hang out, here's my number." And because he's just a great guitarist that I thought was fantastic. And talking to him at shows, he was just a nice guy. And he was from out in Columbia, Maryland, even farther away than Rockville. So I just felt like we had something in common. And we ended up moving into a house together. And that was like a little group house that had other musicians. And it was from the people who lived together in that house. The drummer from Beefeater was living in that house. I actually met the guitar player from Beefeater way before because he was an Obsessed fan. So I would have met Fred Smith in like 1980. Him and a friend of his would always be at the Obsessed shows and we'd talk. And then one day at a show, he's like, "Hey, I'm in a band now, Beefeater." And now it's like 1985. And you should come see us play, 84, 85. Whenever they started, he said that. And then I started going out to see them play. And I just thought they were fucking incredible because they brought in all this sort of funk aspect of music that I used to listen to into this total sort of revolutionary punk idea where the singer was talking about all kinds of, more like social issues, more than just like, destroy kind of thing.
Right.
And it just was really well, that was the first band that really started to make me think. And then Rites of Spring came along, really think about myself, I should say, and my situation with not being happy with this government job that I had, government contractor job, which now was moving into 4 years because by this time it's 1986 that Beefeater is going on tour. And Fred said, "We're looking for someone to drive and be a roadie." And I was like, "Please, please take me with you. I hate my job." And Fred not only had worked for the government and understood, but Beefeater had a song called Government Worker
Right.
because of that he wrote. And so Fred really saved my life because I stopped doing drugs at that point to go on that tour.
Because they were all not doing drugs, or
Yeah, two of them were like, less inclined to behave that way, but they were like, "Okay, whatever." And the other two guys were like, "We want to eat vegetarian and not be like focused on doing drugs during this tour," because it was like 2 months on the road together. So if you're two people who feel this way and two other people who feel that way, it probably was a good idea to draw some lines about how you're all going to get along in this world for 2 months, right? And I was like, "I'll fucking do anything, man. Just take me with you."
right.
And so I became vegetarian and was able to avoid drugs because now I was surrounded by people who just thought differently.
Mm,
And it was kind of awesome. It really helped in my quest to try not to just like, kill myself, basically.
of course.
So and because I was feeling very old at the time. I was 20, at the time I'm fucking 22, and I'm feeling kind of old. Like my body's starting to go like something isn't necessarily right about what we are doing, you know. And I almost copped 100 Valium. I almost got 100 Valium, and it didn't come through. A friend was going to get me that, and then it didn't come through. And that really would have that just could have been like the beginning of the end right there because I really liked narcotics, it turned out, but I never got into like, injecting them or anything. I just enjoyed that. And it would have been really difficult if I began a habit. I would have had a problem.
Yeah. So was it the singer of Beefeater who lived at the Discord house? That's how you originally met Ian Mackaye.
Yeah. The singer Tomas lived at Discord. He was one of the people at that group house. So I met Ian because we were leaving on tour from that house. So the first thing was to meet them at the house. So I took the subway out and I walked and I had like my little bag of some clothes and I go out there to leave on tour and the equipment for the band is there. So they load up the van there and I meet Ian there and we had a little talk about like sort of where I was coming from. And I probably explained a little bit about the house I had been living in that got busted. And then that was it. We went on tour and it really just changed my life because I was like, this fucking makes sense to me, man. You fucking live, you live to play the next show. And suddenly just everything I just didn't understand about life was now making sense. And I really loved Beefeater. And you have to understand this was during the summer is not the best time to be touring, probably anywhere, but it's difficult in the United States too. And everybody's like away on vacation, kids are not in school. So the punk shows that do happen are like not that well attended unless you're a very well-known band. And they're not that well known. And so we're out on that tour and there's not that many people seeing them. And I am like, if this band isn't doing well, I'm never going to be in a band that doesn't. So I really started to dismiss my ability. Now, you have to understand also that in 1984, I had an accident at work and I spent about a year not playing bass because I cut my fingers to the bone on one hand, my left hand. And so I couldn't really play. And then I started trying to play between like parts of 85 into 86. I'm trying to like make that happen with people. And it's just nothing's going anywhere. So that's when I'm on tour with Beefeater and I'm talking about those guys like, oh, I'm supposed to be a bass player, but I'm just starting to try and play bass, but nothing's really happening. And I'd love to do that, but it's actually looking more and more bleak while I'm on the tour. It's just that I'm not really voicing that opinion. But at the same time, Tomas is writing home to Ian and he's going like, Joe wants to be in a band that really has something to say. And I know, you're trying to start a band, so maybe you should consider him as a bass player. And so he's telling Ian about me while we're on tour. And basically, I think that I'm not a fuck up. I'm not I'm not drinking. I don't smoke. I'm eating vegetarian with them for the first time. I'm not complaining about any of it.
Right.
And I'm not complaining about living in a van, like just staying at people's houses, sleeping on floors. I'm actually just loving the whole fucking thing. So,
Nice. Yeah.
so I think the reports back to Ian are that like, this is a guy you could live in a van with. And that's what being in a band is. So it must have meant something to Ian. So,
Good
um,
job, Thomas.
but I don't really know about any of this at the time. I'm just out on tour and, I'm setting them up on stage. I'm very proud that I can set up Kenny's drums almost exactly the way he likes to play them. That's the kind of shit that meant something to me. So for me, I'm not in the band, but I'm as in the band as I can get. you know and they actually halfway through the tour they start asking me up on stage to sing Pay to Come with them. Tomas is like, okay, you go up and do that song. And so he just kind of leaves it to me at the end and it's kind of awesome. Nobody knows me in any of these audiences, so you don't have any real like worry about anything. They don't even know who the fuck you are. you know?
Right.
So along the way, somewhere in Fresno, California, we played with this band and they asked me to sing with them, to stay and to sing. And I was like, what are you fucking talking about? Like, I don't even know what I'm doing, you know? And which meant that they must have been pretty desperate for a singer. I don't know. Because I really didn't know anything about singing.
Did you pull off singing Pay to Come? Because like
Well,
there are too many words in there for
there are too many words. It's, it's a really weird thing because it was something that I just happened to have sort of obsessed over the details of. It was very intriguing to me listening to the Bad Brains tape. I think I just got deeper and deeper in it from like 84, 85, like all those years that I had been listening to that tape. I got into it at work and I brought it to work with me, just the lyrics from the tape, the insert. And I was like, how do the lyrics fall over? So you have like you know, dan dan digga dang digga digga dang digga digga dan and digga digga dan digga digga dan and digga digga boom digga 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 digga. There's this whole thing about rhythm and time.
yeah.
And so I'm like, how is this taking place? So I try to understand how the accent of the beat is allowing the meter of the poetry. I make decisions with precision, lost inside this mad collision, just to see that what to be is perfectly my fantasy. Dun, digga, dun, dun, digga, digga. So I know without is made that in this world we all must pay to write, pay to play, pay to come, pay to fight. It's that's just that was intriguing to me. So I had this band that could actually play the fucking song, and somehow I got them to do it during a sound check, and I just went up and did it.
Nice. Isn't it like the story goes that Ian heard you sing Pay to Come and then he decided he wanted to be in a band with you? Is that just like some
Well, it was like the rest of the decision making because he had heard this stuff from Tomas while we were on tour. Then when we come home from the tour, I actually spent the night at Discord that night. We unloaded the van, we dropped everyone off, and then I just stayed with Tomas in his room and got up the next day. And Ian took us out to lunch to talk about the tour. And so he was also kind of getting to know me after Tomas had written these, word about me. And then, like within days or within a week, there was a show at the 930 Club that turned out to be one of Beefeater's last shows. And they had me get up at the end, and they actually, not only did we do Pay to Come, they dropped fucking Manic Depression on me too.
okay.
Because they did that song sometime, and I'm like, I don't even fucking know the words to Manic Depression, and I'm just singing it. I'm just making shit up. And I want to say we did something else, but I don't even understand what the other song was. But I remember going like, what are you guys doing to me? You know, and but that's what Ian saw, and he hadn't seen me play bass. And
Yeah, he had
basically,
never seen you play bass. That's awesome, but also fucking weird, you
well,
know?
it's an interesting thing because over time you start to understand that a musician that knows music, a musician that knows what they're writing and they know what they're seeing and they know what they're hearing when they see people play and perform, they know what they're after.
Right.
There's a lot of instances of musicians meeting, working with Ornette Coleman used to play with people who just basically came to him because they'd knock on his door and go like, I heard you play and I really want to understand what's going on. And if they met him on the street that way, he'd say, well, why don't you just come over and play? Because that's really the only way to understand it.
All right.
And these are people he didn't even fucking know. He never saw them play or anything. And it's you just start to understand that there's something that is on another level. I asked a guitar player recently to come play with me, and she had taken a lesson with me, and I really didn't know or watched a lot of videos of her playing, but there was just something I understood about her vibe.
Something instinctive thing that you just feel. It's like a gut feeling. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and when we did finally play together, I think I was absolutely right.
Had your fingers healed by then? So like you got together shortly after that, or how was that?
Yeah, I tried. I mean, I had tried actually before the Beefeater tour. I had tried playing in a band like through some word of mouth thing, I knew that this local guy was starting, and he had played with HR, this guy Kenny Dredd, and he was really, really chill about it and very welcoming to people. And although I couldn't play very well, he was really, really positive. He would just go, keep practicing your chops. That's the way he would say it to me.
Mm,
Just keep practicing your chops, man. That's really nice for someone to do that
of course.
when you don't necessarily know what the fuck you're doing. And he could have totally been dismissive and go like, look, we need to find somebody. He was really positive, but I just couldn't I couldn't make it to all the practice. I couldn't do as much as I probably should have to be in that. And I remember when the time came to play a show, I by then Skeeter was around from Scream. He stayed in the house I lived in with Bubba. He slept on the couch for a while. Him and his dog lived with us. He was really just always such a pleasant person to be around that I was like, look, man, you should do this. You should do this gig and play with Kenny's band and do this show. They were called Revelation. And Skeeter played the show. I never played with them live.
That's the Skeeter that the Melvin song is about from the Buzz Osborne EP, right?
Probably.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, because Skeeter had kind of ran off with the van, and that's what left Dave Grohl stranded in LA. And so Bud contacted Nirvana and said, "Hey, I know a drummer." And
Right.
yeah, that's how all that happened.
Yeah. So did you and Ian just get together, or was Colin Sears there already?
Ian was trying to get people together at that time, and he had this guy, Colin Sears, playing drums,
Mm-hmm.
Colin's father's house in Bethesda. And Ian was working at yesterday today and today out in Rockville. I was living in DC. So the Bethesda like home that we could practice in was right in between Ian coming home from work and making his way back to Arlington and me coming from DC, just making my way by subway there. So we would meet in that house. And honestly, we would talk before we played, and we would put on the MC5 and we would listen to a snatch of the MC5 and go like, okay, let's get psyched to writing music. We'd listen to the live MC5 record, pick out the jams, and then we would get down to just working on the riffs we had written, which sounded nothing like the MC5,
Sure.
but we were getting inspired.
Good inspiration. Yeah.
And so we should nod to Wayne Kramer, who just passed, and Brendan had played with, and that was just he was just part of what influenced a lot of DC people to play. A lot of people cited the MC5 as an influence for sure.
Definitely. So
Um,
so when Brandon joined, did the vibe of the band change considerably? Like, did you guys feel like a shift or?
yeah, because we started writing our first songs, a lot of Ian's ideas with some additions from me, and then some of my first ideas started, and then Colin wanted to go back to Dag Nasty because they were going on tour. And so Colin left us and said, I want to do this tour. And we were like, okay, so we needed to find another drummer. We started auditioning people, and Brendan sat in with us, but he was in Happy Go Licky at the time, which was literally my favorite band at the time. I was even using the Beefeater van to like help them move their equipment to the shows and stuff. I liked them so much. And so when we played with Brendan, it was kind of like, oh my God, how is he going to play with us? He's in my favorite band, you know. And I had loved Rites of Spring, and so loving like Happy Go Licky was just kind of something I just didn't see how that was all going to work. But it basically was a year of playing with Ian, and about a quarter of the way to the end of that, we got Brendan in the band because Happy Go Licky stopped playing. And finally did our first show from when Ian and I started to play together. It was like a year that it turned out September of 1987 was the first time we played as Fugazi, and we were a three-piece.
Was that just because you wanted to be well prepared, or did it just take that long to get things in place?
Yeah, we had to start writing music. Ian was really refining like singing and playing guitar. I was refining, like, playing the bass. And we basically lost our first drummer. So then we had to get over like finding a new drummer. And no one was anywhere near what it felt like playing with Brendan. So we kind of found ourselves just kind of waiting for things to work out. And then Brendan was suddenly available, and there we were.
So Guy was there already on the second or third show or something, singing backing vocals.
Yeah.
Did he come to practice and sing with you, or did he just jump up on stage one day? Or
He started trying things out at practice, but he may have he was listening to the practices because he was invited, but he wasn't really taking part till he was ready. He wasn't totally convinced that this music made any sense to him. He always played guitar and sang in a band, so it was really weird for him to enter into this band that had already started. He had always been in bands with Brendan, so he was like, what the fuck is going on? How can I not be in the band that Brendan is in? So it was a really weird situation for him, and I don't think it fit him very well in the beginning. Um, I think it was really hard, but he managed to enter it as a singer who sang lead sometimes and mostly backing vocals, and he danced. And we did an entire tour of the United States and Europe like that. That was not easy for him, before Repeater finally got made, because I mean, Repeater was really the first record where Guy was writing with us. We were finishing off the songs that we had when we made Margin Walker, the EP, while we were in England at the European tour that we did with Guy singing and doing backing vocals, but Guy really wasn't playing guitar on that stuff. So that was like Margin Walker represented that sort of moment of Guy in the band, and then doing that single that came out also along with, that it was around the time period of Repeater. Maybe the 3 songs single just ended up being on the CD together with Repeater. So I've lost track of when that single came out, but
yeah, you recorded that, I think, in the summer of '89. Yeah.
so there you go. That was like a continuation of the rest of the material from what we could have done from Margin Walker.
Right, right. I mean, I think because I've heard Guy say that like he didn't need to be in that group because you were kind of fully formed, and you kind of were. Like it's awesome that he was able to join and get into it.
Yeah.
But when you listen to the Fugazi EP and the Margin Walker EP, and even some of these first shows, that you're playing, like you are super tight already, and like you don't feel like there's anything missing.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, we had become that particular type of band as a 3-piece, but we really did get to become yet another band when we made Repeater, which is kind of the beauty of the band, because we kind of just became these 2 different entities. There was kind of the songwriting of the 3-piece, but that quickly had the additional role of Guy, which was just out of nowhere. So people kind of expected this band that Ian Mackaye was heading, and then were hit by like a nuclear weapon that was Guy Picciotto.
Sure.
And I think that was really in our favor, because it was like this secret thing that got dropped on them. They kind of didn't expect it. And then all of a sudden there was like, just Guy's just kind of a monster on stage. And then between the way Ian played guitar and shit, then it grew into Guy's guitar playing and singing and everything too. So it was just, yeah, I mean, we were very aware of each other's like possibilities in writing together, and we made sure to always sort of honor that and respect that, and kind of be able to move forward and discover new things that way.
Right. That's like Repeater. That's the first album that everyone was bringing in parts to, like.
Right. Yeah, yeah. That was like really bringing in Guy as a guitar player. And yeah, it was like just a whole new band that was like a 2 singer, 2 guitar player band.
Right. So Ted Nicely, he worked on you on the first EP and then on the 3-song EP and Repeater. Like his role, was it more just of an engineer, or was he interjecting like his ideas into the process? Like what was Ted's role is what I'm essentially asking.
Yeah, he was definitely acting like a producer because Don Zientara really was doing the engineering. He was taking care of equipment, but Ted, you have to understand, Ted was in a local band called the Raz that was like equivalent to like a pub rock, like Ian and the Blockheads, the way pub rock in England sort of turned into punk rock. The Raz was that kind of a band. They didn't have no one understood them on that level. They just knew there was something fucked up and different about this band. And the singer was like had an attitude and was, it was a very punk band, but they were coming out of like the rock world, but they weren't just doing covers. They were doing their own music. So anyway, Ted went through that, and the second guitar player they ended up with, this guy Tommy Keene, ended up to go on and be signed, and Ted went with him when the Raz fell apart. But as Tommy got signed, the record company sort of looked at Ted and was like, he doesn't look right. And so Ted was kind of like, fuck you. He much was pissed from that situation and got more into a role of producing records and he had so much knowledge about, being in a band and music background and so forth. And Brendan, Ian, and Guy knew this because they all worked with Ted at the record store yesterday and today. And Skip Groff, who ran that store, was the one who introduced Don Zientara to Ian and got Don as, the person who ended up engineering and recording so many things for Discord.
So would you say that Ted was like a important piece in what became those first albums that he worked on with you?
Yeah, I mean, everyone respected his opinion about things, and it's not like our songs changed. I mean, that's what our songs were. But I think he was a really good, encouraging person that people also in the band trusted because, Ian and Brendan were not going to listen to fucking anyone anyway. They were not going to listen to an outsider. So Ted was inside enough that they were going to respect his opinion about things. And I just didn't like, I guess I was from Rockville, so I was always an outsider. Just the way I felt. I had been in studios before. I had played bass on someone's tape. A band had made a tape, the Platinum Slugs, who lived in College Park and were around for when that house got busted that I lived in. In fact, one of them did get busted, and even though he lived in the barn and I lived in the house, I didn't. But anyway, I played bass on their tape. So I'd been in the studio and I didn't really know much about what I was doing, but I sat there and played the lines and figured it out. They had already recorded the music. I was dubbing everything by headphones. And so I did understand some of what went on. They just kind of talked me through it, and I learned the songs and they showed me what to do. And all of that was experience. And before that, I found from the Nike chicks, I found there was a studio in the basement of a house in the neighborhood I fucking grew up in. When I lived with Wino, the Nike chicks showed up one day. They were a DC band of girls that were awesome and just fearless. And they showed up, two of them showed up one day and said, we have time booked in the studio, but we don't have our guitar player and our drummer. Will you guys come over? And I was like, I'll play drums. And Wino was like, I'll play guitar. We just fucking went over there and we didn't know what we were doing. And we did the songs with them.
Yeah, I guess that's the lesson. You just go ahead and fucking do it if you want to, like even if you're over your head.
Yeah, I was sitting in a room where I couldn't even see anyone. And I had headphones. And they'd be like, okay, Joe, this song goes like this. And then they were like, play while we show you the song. So I would just start playing. And then they would finish and go, okay, that was good. This next song goes like, and I was like, well, aren't we going to record the last song? And they were like, we did, it's fine. I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I couldn't have been more lost.
Nice.
But they were just so fucking funny. I still talk to Selena on Facebook. She lives in Germany. And I still she is so inspirational to me. Just to see her. I've seen her when I've been on tour in Germany. And it's just so great to see her because I'm like, this woman will do whatever the fuck she wants to, man. You know, and that was such a great band to see. And they even let me play drums with them live once, and it just it meant a lot to me at the time because I couldn't get anything going at that time, and I played drums with them, and it was awesome. Anyway, maybe with Fugazi in the studio, I did have some idea about what was going on, but mostly it was just the band playing the songs live, like bam, trying to get them down.
So the basic tracks on repeater, you recorded them live.
Totally, yeah. We would do that, and if things had to be fixed. I remember Ian had stepped out, and then Ted had a word with me about something going on in a song, and it was with Shut the Door. And he was like, this, you know, you could do this better, right? And I was like, I think so, yeah. And so he just had me put on the headphones and do it. And I just had no clue that it was an open spot where the drums stopped. And I was overdubbing with nothing to hold on to. And Ian came in during that and he said, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Ted just wanted to go over this pot." And he was like, "There's no drums there. You can't do, like, how can you do that?" And I was like, "Well, I really hadn't thought of that until you brought it up."
Did that end up being the version on the album?
Yeah, it's just that I did execute.
Damn.
I did it. It's just that I didn't know that it was supposed to be that hard. But I only knew that because Ian was actually just so upset about it. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess that was a dumb idea." But I didn't take that into consideration. But luckily, I think I saw my role though very much as a timekeeper, and it did help that I wrote that. I wrote that song. And I wrote be da dum dum da dum ba dee doo da dee. You know what I mean? So if if that's the part that we're talking about that was hard, well, at least I fucking wrote it. So if I had
Right.
a chance
You should know how it
during
goes.
something like that, you know what I mean? And if it was someone else's song, yeah, I might have actually had a harder time, but I at least understood what I wrote.
Well, that's what Brenton has said, that you were kind of his, John Entwistle, that like you kept everything steady and he was able to like mess around and go all over the place, which has yielded like we know awesome results.
Yeah, he could let things loose with the rest of the band and basically follow. He's always been a drummer that he actually thought it was interesting to play to the guitar player as a drummer, to follow the guitar player. And so he could do that. He could follow Ian, he could follow Guy, or he could just kind of check in with what I'm doing. And that made, I think, things unique that way too. Yeah.
So when you did Steady Diet, was Ted just not available, or did you decide on your own that you wanted to produce it?
I think we had made a conscious decision to try that. I think Ted was also he had been studying during repeater and was only available at certain times for us to get together, and we had to sort of wait to a degree. I think we also didn't want to go through that, and we also wanted to try on our own. It didn't have the best results. We weren't totally happy with it, but everyone was also so opinionated about music. I really felt that the band had to keep trying. But when we got to the next record, everybody was still kind of like, maybe we shouldn't do it ourselves.
Are you talking about after Steady Diet?
After Steady Diet. So the first songs we went in and recorded with for In on the Kill Taker. Actually, today, if you listen to those two songs, they sound like God produced them.
Yeah, are they available?
They are not yet, but we have to make them available because we did a perfectly good job and we didn't trust ourselves. And then we went and found like, oh, let's see what Steve Albini would do. And we took a couple of songs to him, and then we ended up having such a great time with Steve because Steve's a great guy, and we just had a great time with him that we recorded every piece of material we had then, even though the songs weren't even finished being written. And that was just at his house. We recorded in his basement. We didn't go into a studio. We ended up recording a whole record's worth of shit with him, and we didn't really care for the way it turned out in the end.
Yeah, just a bonding time because like you became good friends and toured together.
Yeah, and we decided we would respect the way Steve had worked on that and just put the whole thing aside and not try to take part of it because that just seemed lame. So The weird thing is that I had forgotten over the years, like that we had recorded two songs before that happened. And man, the fact that we didn't use those two songs and take that as the beginning of recording that record for ourselves, really a mistake. But we just were unaware of that at the time.
And you're saying you feel that those songs sound better than the end result of the Kill Taker.
It at least as good, if not better. I mean, because it's the band representing itself, it should be seen as better in quotations, of course, as someone's idea of what's better. But you have to admit, if the band is getting its own sound across, it can't be too bad an idea. But anyway, someday you'll be able to hear that shit. We're trying to figure out how and what group of music to put that up with, but we're thinking of just adding it in a way to the live series as a chunk of music to be able to download, for $5 or whatever. So um that's the weird thing, because then we went, and then In on the Kill Taker sounded all right, but I still felt like this just sounds, I wasn't really comparing it to those two songs because it's not like I had a way of playing those two songs at that time. I just felt that the band, here I am sitting in a van with these guys all the time, listening, all four of us just talking about music so intensely. And I'm living with Ian, and the two of us at home are talking about music so intensely all the time. And I'm like, these three guys can do that. I didn't have the ear for that shit. I listened to something a couple of times and I'm like, fuck, I don't know. You know, I just can't make a decision like that. I stopped hearing it. My ears were toasted before I was in that band.
Really? You mean your hearing?
Yeah, my hearing was fucked up before that band because I used to sit in the basement with the Obsessed with a fucking PA and shit when Vance was the singer, and listen to them practice. You know what I mean? So, and I would go to their shows and I wouldn't have earplugs in, and I just trashed my fucking hearing. But anyway,
When you recorded Kill Taker, was it a whole different approach from, let's say, Repeater that you did also with Ted and Don? The whole process, because to me it sounds a lot better, and like it sounds more like the live Fugazi.
well, I think we probably got at the possibilities of a different sound because Repeater is recorded in Don's basement in a small suburban home. It's not a large room, although it sounds fucking phenomenal. So does all the Minor Threat shit. So much other music. But anyway, Steady Diet is the first record we do in Don's bigger studio in the new space. But In on the Kill Taker is kind of the second one that we're doing there. So now we're getting more familiar with that space. And Don is more familiar making music in his new space. So I suppose it sounds different for that. And Ted should have a better grip on the band and producing and et cetera, et cetera. So it should sound decent. But I think after that, I think I actually pushed the band and said, I won't do another record with an outside producer.
Okay, so that was your
I literally said that in order to make them see that they could do it because I really believed that the three of them could do it. I don't know if anyone else is going to remember it that way, but for me, they were talking about it again when the next record was coming along. And I was, are you fucking kidding me? Because I think by then we were recording demo stuff on our 8-track. And so we had some of the Red Medicine stuff recorded. We were practicing in Guy's parents' basement. And we were kind of like experimenting with our own 8-track and 16-track board. And I was like, this is fucking wild, that we can be loose and experiment.
Didn't some of these recordings on the 4 and 8-track end up like on the actual records, the end products?
They ended up, especially they ended up on the instrument soundtrack. That's what a lot of that material comes from. But because I think of us embarking on that, I was just like, why are we bringing in someone outside the four of us when the three of these guys are totally capable of doing that? And sure enough, I think that's proven on Red Medicine and Hits, and as we keep going.
Sure, definitely. So, but did you have to twist their arms a little bit?
Well, I think because I am a fairly quiet person in deliberation. I think that I just saw it in a certain way, and at some point I was just like, okay, I'm not going to do the next record, with Ted again. And it just happened to be Ted. It wasn't because it was Ted. It was just because it wasn't the band. And so I was basically like, look, I won't do it. So how do you all feel about that? And they were basically like, okay. So
Sure.
I just pressured them into doing it. You know what I mean?
How do you remember the reception? Because like Killtaker, I think it sold like around 200,000 copies in the first week. So you guys were getting fairly big.
I don't remember things like that because you have to remember that we never, because it was an independent label, we never had an immediate kind of reaction in terms of the industry and how records come out and how they get how people like buy them and stuff. We literally often we were just touring, cycling through North America, Europe, South America, and a part of Asia. We were just cycling through those places. And we would practice and write music, record music in between, and release records.
Yeah, it was in '93 where you played 132 shows in in a year, in 1 year, which means you were playing a show every third day, more than every third day. Yeah.
So we just didn't have any coordination for finishing the record and then the record coming out and us embarking on a world tour to support that record.
Yeah, yeah. You were on the tour before the record came out playing new songs and people were like, what the fuck?
Exactly. We might finish half of the world we're going to cover, the part that we do play, and then the record would come out. And then we would have like maybe 2 weeks off. And then we would go out, or a month, and then we would go out and tour again. It just didn't happen that way. So those things all happened, and we booked what we could do. I mean, Ian was booking what we could do, what venues would take us at the price we wanted people to be paying. It was all, it was a lot of fucking work. So it just kind of came out the way that it did.
Did it change though? Because when you guys started, you did always all ages gigs and no security. When you started to get bigger, did clubs starting to insist that you had security because like
Yeah, they could insist on security, but if they wouldn't do the door price with us, we just basically waited. We were always looking for a person in a town to find the venue in their town that would do our price. And sometimes the venue didn't do it. We in a smaller town, we would just they would somebody would rent a hall. We'd have a kid and his mother, taking money at the door. You could have any kind of a situation in that band all the way through it. But in bigger cities where the more people were coming, we'd be playing bigger venues that decided on doing a lower door price. I mean, we didn't play a club in New York City for years because the promoter who locked down most of the clubs in the city, they just would not do our door price. So we just played Columbia University, New York University or something. And we would just play those until a promoter said, I don't care if I lose money. I'm going to be the guy who brought Fugazi to play in a club for $5. And we did 2 nights at the Marquee. He may have lost some money, but he was just really psyched about what he did. And he continued to bring us to clubs and make it work.
yeah, it started to be like in the mid '90s, like all of the grunge icons were wearing the band name. It started to be like really cool getting into Fugazi and everyone's like it gave you a lot of street cred, you know?
It really helped. Nirvana turned a lot of regular people on to what was going on in the punk world. So people who might not normally have said they even want to think about that shit, would suddenly go like, "Oh fuck, this is what Kurt was into. I should take a look." And so that really elevated a lot of independent bands. That definitely helped.
Yeah, I mean, I only knew the Meat Puppets through the MTV like years before I even heard the Meat Puppets, and I was like, hey, I know these songs. They sound weird.
It's
And this,
wild, right?
yeah.
Totally.
So did the touring experience change somewhat? Because I remember reading about you guys were sleeping like on floor next to like cat piss and vomit and so forth, like on the first few tours, but
Well, those things happen over time in places that you say yes to. And they happened to me later when I was doing my solo stuff. I'd end up in some weird situations, that I was in charge of, so I got myself into. But, you don't always get the best situation when you just ask to sleep on someone's floor. But it did change over the years, and we could stay, in hotels more often and afford to be able to do so. But we were like the fans of a Motel 6, which was, the cheaper place to stay in. We just needed a decent place to sleep. So it's not like we just, as soon as we could, we moved into like a four-star hotel. We were basically trying to make things work monetarily. It was all you have to remember that the whole thing in Fugazi is a very incremental change, a very small step at a time that changed. There was never a drastic change. Um, can I take a break for just a minute and come back with you? Because I don't mind. I'll keep talking.
sure, yeah, definitely.
Hold on, I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
All right. It's funny because I was checking out how many gaps in touring you had from the spring of '89 throughout '93 that lasted more than 4 weeks.
Hmm.
And I counted 8 of those gaps only. And within those 8 gaps, you recorded the 3-song EP, Repeater, Steady Diet, and In on the Kill Taker. It's like, what the
Wow.
fuck? I mean, you were just grinding it out. I mean, like it kind of you started taking more like gaps towards the end, but these first years, it's like nothing like I've ever seen, I think, when you really get into it.
It's just I think what bands I mean, I don't think we're the only bands that did that. I just want to say that when you're that age and that's what your focus is. I mean, I was a bass player in a band because I refused to do anything else.
Sure.
I mean, I didn't even understand how to play the instrument technically. And I was that focused because I was fucking, psychotic. I was just that's the way it is. It's like an obsession that you are just so totally involved in. That's what meant the most to me. It actually still, I am 60 years old and I would do a tour and still sleep at people's houses. It doesn't bother me. I don't even like being still. It hurts to sit still, but I'll sit in the van for 5 hours a day so I can play an hour. And I still do that and sleep on people's floors, which just maybe means that there's something wrong with me, but I don't really mind.
Yeah, it could be worse, definitely.
So it's just if you know what you like to do, you know that you like to do it. And I'll just do it until I can't anymore.
It's probably a moot point to ask you if you have like a favorite Fugazi tour. It must just blend all into one big chunk.
Yeah, I mean there are totally different things that happened, like being able to go to Australia and Japan, where we would stop, there'd be we would change planes. We changed planes once in some island I had never been to. And now I can't even fucking think of it. Where were we? That's so weird. Anyway, I can feel the air was so different. I never felt like that, like sort of being on a tropical island like that, and it was just some Pacific island that we stopped on the way from Japan to Australia. And that kind of thing is just so different and wild to be in places like Australia and Brazil. The Brazil, Argentina, Chile we managed to go to. It's really interesting being on the southern hemisphere. It's bizarre. The Earth is a really weird place to live if you get to move around it. It's fucking insane that we managed to live here, and we're so stupid that we don't look after the Earth or absolutely worship and respect it the way we should.
Sure, definitely.
It's literally our life, and it's us, And to do these weird things like extracting oil everywhere and not figure out that we're being total idiots is just, we're a pathetic species, is about all I've come up with.
I mean, we have a hard time seeing things in perspective. Like, yeah, my great great grandkids, I don't give a fuck about them. It's not my problem.
Mhm.
If I can make some money right now, fuck those guys. Besides,
Absolutely.
everyone else is doing it. What am I gonna change? And yeah.
Seriously.
Did you see like a difference, like because you were the first years you did the States and Europe, then when you started going to like Japan, Brazil, the difference in the crowds, how the crowds reacted, like how the people reacted.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, different cultures definitely have different, different um what would be the word? Different manners of receiving you, that people can be very quiet in Japan and stuff is weird, to a degree when you play. And then again, it's a reflection of the society that you're in and stuff. And it's just all interesting that it's different. It's never like, there's never I've never been any place that's like, I don't know, awful to play or anything. So it's just
You
different,
played in pre-war Yugoslavia. That's really interesting. Like you came like to the same city 3 times in a row,
right?
and the third time it was then like by then Slovenia, I think.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm old as shit is the answer to
I mean, I remember that on the news actually. So
that. Yeah, yeah.
so when you did End Hits, that's the longest time. Like that's the first record where you like came back from, I think, Australia and Hong Kong and Malaysia, and then you went back in the middle of recording End Hits back to Australia and New Zealand.
Oh, maybe that was because Ian had got sick and we had to go make up dates.
Ah, okay, you were making updates. Okay.
I think that if I'm right, that's when that happened.
I think you also went down to Brazil while recording End Hits. It's like I think it's the only album where you just like were touring while recording the album.
Yeah, I guess because by then we were also, Brendan was having kids already. So our time was based around, what could be band time and when Brendan needed to be home. And yeah, we were just probably juggling things differently.
All right. Do you think it affected the end result of the album that you were like going to all these exotic places and traveling in between recording? Or
I don't know. It certainly reflected the cover of End Hits, didn't it? It's a
I
picture.
I mean I've seen people compare End Hits. I mean it like End Hits definitely has its cult. But I saw online people are saying, yeah, it's like Ill Communication by the Beastie Boys. It's the first record that doesn't sound drastically different from the other ones. And I think it get kind of harshly judged for that.
That's funny. Yeah, I think End Hits in a way is like we hit something in Red Medicine, and then we weren't done saying it in End Hit. But I do think that the argument is then yet another record after that. But I think in, the 8 albums we made or whatever, I think they change. They're kind of in, I mean, it's the same fucking band. And so it's very hard to see how it's different from the outside, but you do try to cover some new ground, and
I mean, they changed a lot,
we did
obviously.
try,
Yeah.
yes, it's hard.
It's funny because you came to Iceland in the spring of '99. You played in the car park of the National Radio building. Do you remember coming here?
Just a little bit. I mean, we got to when we talk about that, we've actually played another car park. So when you've played one car park, they all seem the same. You can park a car in it, you know what I mean? So it does kind of feel the same, but I do remember being there. I guess it's just that it was a car park, so I don't have any like, what was the backstage like? Well, there's no other like, thing, point of reference. I do remember being in Iceland in Reykjavik, and I do remember going to kayak in the ocean.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a guy from the Sugar Cubes, I guess, was like, those Fugazi people might want to come visit. And he was really nice and just invited us to go kayaking. So we had this day that we went there and we got in an ocean kayak and went kayaking. It was fucking blew my mind.
Nice. I mean, you weren't used to getting a lot of tourist stuff while you were on the road.
Fuck no.
Yeah,
No, we didn't do a lot of stuff. So it was, when you do anything, it's very memorable.
sure. It's funny. I dug up like a newspaper that came out the following week. Like this guy went to the concert, like concert review, written by some clown. The headline was "Unvaried Punk Rock," and I read in it, Fugazi had two drummers and neither of them were good, and the band didn't take break between songs, which would have been okay if the songs hadn't all sounded the same.
That is awesome.
That's good. That's good shit. So Jerry was already playing live with you then, I guess. Jerry Busher.
Yeah, that would have been like that era of just start to incorporate Jerry as another sound. Um, so we could make all the songs sound the same.
Right. I mean, I've listened. I downloaded the concert. It's one of the few that has like excellent rating on the Fugazi live series. It's a good concert, you know.
That's funny.
This guy must have been like 50 or something. You know, it's like, oh, what's going on here?
That is so funny. Yeah, I don't know. I never heard about that. I can't wait to tell Ian about that.
Jerry had been a roadie for you for a few years, or
Yes, he had been traveling with us, um, taking care of guitars and then helping move. So him and Joey P, the sound man, they would travel together and we would travel together when we were in the United States. Like the band would be in a minivan, Joey and Jerry would be in a bigger truck or just a bigger van that held the equipment. And um, and so that was just part of our thing. And then slowly, I mean, we were all fans of Jerry drumming, so it just became like this idea to try to lock the two of them together because they're different types of drummers. And it was just really fun to have a different angle at it,
I mean, Jerry and Brendan, they gel really well together on the drum set.
Yeah, I mean, they're both just good drummers who know how to make things work. I mean, Brendan could probably play with any other drummer and do the right things for that drummer. I mean, and Jerry's that way too. I mean, he's so good at percussion. I used to ask him when I did my solo stuff, if I had a drummer I was touring with, we'd come through town and I'd say, Jerry, do you want to play percussion with us? Because Jerry just has a way of locking things in and then the drummer becomes more free. And I loved that aspect. So when I had Ricardo playing drums and Jerry came and did percussion, I love that shit.
You obviously had mastered the sonics of the recording studio for the argument.
Yeah, we really understood the studio as a separate assignment. Playing live was one world and the studio was another world. So that's what we started to really get into in Red Medicine and N Hits, because that's what that really is. That's the exploration of this new world of the studio. So maybe it's not too surprising they ended up sounding similar. But yeah, we really did try to embrace that idea that, like, look, you don't have to worry about it. You know that you're going to execute it live. How would you say it in the studio?
Was there talk among you when you were making the album that this would be the last one, or when did that vibe start to creep in, that the band was going on a break? Do you remember that?
I don't think we were aware of it recording the last album at all. I think Brendan had two kids and was on the way. I mean, really, he was going to have four children. So I think just things just started to become more and more clear, and that was the issue. It was like he just voiced that need to, like, I need to have control of my life, and the band controls my life. And that was something that we understood as a band, that you couldn't do the band in a partial way, that the band needed to dictate what was going on. And I don't mean the band as like who the four of us are, the band almost as an entity unto itself that you had to respect. And that is the collective force of what the four of us are. And when we couldn't really properly feed that animal, is the way I like to think about it, then we realized we better let that animal go to sleep. Otherwise, if you try to keep the animal awake and you don't feed it, it'll fucking eat you instead.
So like you're doing the argument winter spring 2001. I think you did your last show like in the summer of 2002, your last DC show. By then, did you know by then that okay, this is our probably our last show in DC, or like before you did that final tour around England?
No, I no, because we didn't know that our last shows would actually be in England. So yeah, we just didn't know. It just came
What
about.
was it just after that tour that like it came up?
I think we no, I think we were still going in and practicing and writing. And then I think it just reached a point where Brennan was like, he couldn't see going into the next wave of like writing and touring and then recording and touring. I think he was just like, I need to be in charge of my life. I'm having all these children.
Sure. I mean that's obviously, respectable thing to do.
And Brennan has a great family. And so if he made a mess of his family and he got a divorce and he didn't take care of his family and his kids, I'd be really mad about the whole situation.
Sure.
But Brennan has a wonderful family and they're really amazing and people that I like to hang out with, all his kids. Kind of blow my mind. So I've never ever regretted or feel bad about it or anything.
I mean, this obviously cemented you guys like going out on a very strong note, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something on another level as a performer. It's still in to a degree because I like to go out and play and it's not easy to do. Then I can think about Fugazi and go, and I'm in a band that everyone would love to see and they won't go play.
Yeah.
But I've learned to live with that, I've learned, and it was not easy. I probably should have sought some kind of psychological help after the band stopped playing. Recommend that for anyone who's been in a band for a while, that they should go seek some kind of therapy.
Right.
That would help.
I mean, like you guys weaned yourself a little bit by slowing down towards the end, but it must have been weird getting home and not having that commitment. Although you had already done like the Black Sea EP, like you were already doing other stuff, but still like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I never intended to like that was a downtime when I had my daughter that Fugazi wasn't going to come over and play with me because I had my daughter. But Shelby would come over and play with me. So I was like, well, come over because nobody else will.
Oh, really? Okay, so that just happened. Okay.
You know what I mean? And so I was like, that's what I did. But I had no intention of like trying to be in that band anyway that I was going to go play with. I never played a show with him or anything.
Ah, okay, okay. But you have
Um,
been definitely the most prolific member of Fugazi, post Fugazi.
that's hard to believe, but if you're telling me that, then you must have looked at everyone else. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, music-wise, definitely. I mean, you go through that Black Sea, do it, and then you change to Decahedron, do that album. Then the same year, do the thing with John Frusciante, and these two albums, and then you do your first solo album, what, 2006? Yeah,
well, I still don't have proper health insurance. So
all right.
I'm just gonna have to keep writing those records.
Sure. Not because I want to.
Well, it means I'm gonna have to keep trying. But that's why I teach because I'm still trying to figure out like how to make the music thing work because you don't always make money from it and you just have to keep something going. But I don't understand if people are always going to want bass lessons. So there are more important things in the world.
Are there?
To some people, yes. But but yeah, that's hard to believe. I never really thought about that, and I don't know what to say.
Sure, sure.
It's
But
so weird.
but like you had to kind of, I've heard you say in an interview, you had to relearn making music by yourself when you were doing these solo albums because you were so used to being like a cog in the wheel.
Yes, for sure. I really didn't. I had really learned how to make music with people, record, tour, do all these things with those three guys. So when we decided not to be together, it made sense in terms of why we made that decision and what Brennan was talking about. But literally to go home and deal with it, I was like, what the fuck have I done? It was hard. But yeah, but I wasn't done. So I just had to set out understanding what I now needed to do that.
So how do you, when you were writing lyrics, how did you approach your lyric writing?
Well, I luckily lyrics were coming to me, you know. I knew that lyrics were going to have to go with the music I was hearing because I had done some songs with Fugazi, so I just kind of kept trying to figure out how that was going to work. So I listened to very lyrical people like Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and uh and just tried to understand things about that world and sort of the flow of how one expresses things lyrically. And then I had to combine that with literally what I was capable of playing while I was singing. So I figured, well, there's only one way I'm going to be able to sing and figure out what the bass line can be at the same time. So maybe it'll be unique. And maybe it was unique. Not a lot of people actually wanted to, hear that stuff. But I'm happy I made those records, I think I did a decent job. Um, but it's not like I was gaining like a larger and larger audience or anything. So um, I was happy I kind of also reached a point where I wasn't really happy with my lyrics. And so I was happy to stop doing that and actually pursue instrumental music. That happened before I came back to the States, and I was writing music that I didn't really understand, but I wanted to construct so it could function instrumentally. It's just that it required improvisation. It required somebody who really was into improvising. And that person turned out to be Anthony. I played some of that music I had written in Italy for Brendan when I came back to the US. And Brendan thought of Anthony. He was like, "Oh, I know a guy that would be good for this." And that's when we started to play together.
Right. Must have felt good, like getting back together with your old buddy.
It was insane. It wasn't until we played the first show that I realized I have not played live with Brendan for almost exactly 15 years.
Okay, it was that long.
Yeah, because it was 2002 to 2017.
Sure. Wow.
It was only shy of a few months. It kind of fucking blew my mind.
Did you get right back into it? Just like, okay, you must have like this unspoken bond when playing on stage
Oh
together.
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. I had such a feeling at that very first show. We were playing in a very small bar that was literally a bar and some tables. And they had to like move some of the tables. So we played right next to the front door entrance to the street and just on the floor. There's no stage. It wasn't big enough to even have a stage. And I was just about to start playing. And I was thinking, God, these guys play some of these songs fast and it's really hard to play. And then I had this feeling it's like my body recognized Brendan in the room to play a show. And I got this feeling that literally went from my feet all the way up through my body, through the top of my head. And I was like, I am not going to have a problem through this show because I just got hit by a fucking lightning bolt of adrenaline and I am going to be fine. And sure enough, you could have thrown anything at me, and I think I could have played it. I was completely on air for that whole show, and I think they started out doing some things faster than they could handle. But I was like, "Let's go."
Is that show available somewhere, do you think?
I don't know that anybody recorded it. Yeah,
Okay. So when you did the new, because you started studying music theory after you left Fugazi.
I didn't start that until 2020 when COVID hit. I was selling tickets for the 930 Club and the venues that it owns. There's a couple of venues where they book shows. And so I was in one of those venues they don't own, the Lincoln Theater, selling from a box office of the theater. You could buy tickets to any of the shows they do, like 5 or 6 different venues. And I lost that job because COVID came. And so I was like, now what am I going to do? And my partner was like, I think you better start teaching because you have to. I was like, uh-oh, I guess I have to. So I started trying to figure out how to do that online. I just started putting out ads and everybody was, trapped at home. So that helped.
Yeah. I mean, I took your lessons back in 21. It was really nice. I still have the sheets. You know, it works if you don't have an idea what you're doing, even if you have a guitar that's like open tuning or whatever you have in your hands and just, just use it as a wedge to get into something else, It really
Cool.
works. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, I think I've gotten better and better as time goes on at teaching because, I'm talking about the same thing. So I have to get better at conveying that information to people. So it's a definitely a rewarding kind of a job to have. So I'm very happy to have it. And I have to say that it's something, in a sense, I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to be able to relate things to people they can do something with. It's really something I enjoy doing.
Didn't it also help you with like playing with James while like doing the album, to communicate?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, the fact that Anthony is a completely studied person, as a guitar player. The things I'm learning, I've always been able to talk to Anthony about and understand better. And now we're able to take, kind of weigh out concepts and implement them, and it's really nice. So yeah, setting up the record for James was something that was very natural to me to do with Anthony, to write it to a certain degree and then leave open what would clearly be an interesting exploration for James and Anthony to fill in. And so it's structured and then it's open. And we got through the record so easily that way. I mean, I finished writing some shit in the studio. I just implemented a part and then James was like, that's cool that you went there. Let's do that. And then why don't you go to the back to that part and then keep taking it up. Uh, keep going up in octaves, as you go, or up in tone as you go, ascend with that single idea. And I was just like, you want to figure that shit out now? Like that's how I felt. But then I totally understood what he meant. And then the next thing I knew, we were recording it, So it was kind of like, yeah. I at the same time, while we were recording, I was trying to remember what we were doing. And I'd look over at James and he'd have the music in front of him that Anthony wrote out a melody. And I was like, he knows everything that he's going to do and what's going to happen in this song. And he just got here yesterday. And I'm still trying to remember how this fucking song goes.
I mean, when I heard the new single Emergence, I was like, fuck yes. It sounds very,
I'm glad it hits you that way. That's awesome.
yeah. Is there gonna be like a physical copy of the record or like where it's
Yeah, the record is coming out on Impulse in March.
right?
So
Impulse like has featured artists like what? Alice and John Coltrane,
yeah,
Bill Evans, Charles Mingus, Pharoah Sanders. Who am I missing?
yeah. Yeah, it's insane. Yeah. And the new lineup of people that they have that are currently like putting out records and touring. We got to play Winter Jazz Fest this past January with a bunch of those bands. We opened the night that was sort of the impulse night of the Winter Jazz Fest. That was really great being able to see those bands. Our friend Luke Stewart is a bass player from here in Washington, D.C., and he's in Irreversible Entanglements, and they got signed like a year before we did. And their record came out and they played that night. And they're a fucking awesome band that I got to see a couple of times before. They're always great to see. I highly recommend Irreversible Entanglements. The other people on that label, like, you know, there's The Comet is Coming and the Sons of Kemet. And both of those bands are featuring this guy, Shabaka Hutchings, saxophone player. And his shit is really fucking interesting to listen to. There's a woman who plays harp, um, Brandy Younger. And she was great that night too. And just everyone who played that night was awesome. But yeah, the Shabaka also has Shabaka and the Ancestors. He has a bunch of things that are on there. a guy named Ted Poor, who I'm not as familiar with. And apparently Pino Palladino is on that label too. And I haven't even got to listening to all the people that are involved.
I mean, it's just awesome that you guys have kept it going all this time. And like Coriky, that album was really good. It's just,
Yeah, I have to say, when you look at what's going on in the business and whether or not anyone's going to pay attention to you and that kind of shit, it can feel very daunting and not make you want to be involved at all. But if you really want to do music and like me, having been in Fugazi and the records coming out on Discord, I mean, that's our own world in a way. And from the beginning, people looked at Fugazi and they were like post-hardcore blah blah blah. And
right.
I was like, oh, fuck that. Reading about us doesn't make me want to do this. So I feel like I was never a part of that shit to fucking worry about it or anything. So I just, for me, it's like as long as I feel like it, I'm gonna try, even if it's just going down and playing somewhere locally. I just want to fucking play, and I'm gonna figure out a way to do it. And as long as I can, until I can't physically do it. It's just the way I am, I guess.
Sure. And by then you'll have like brain implants, so you can just do it like, with like brain signals. That's in like 10
Yes,
years, seriously. So we're good.
for sure.
Okay. Dude, thanks for taking the time. I really do appreciate it. It's
Right on. Yeah, man. I'm
uh,
happy to do it.
so you guys are going out like East Coast and Canada tour now, throughout March and May, right?
Yeah, we start out in March with a couple of festivals, one in Idaho, and then 2 days later, or we finish that, then we fly and we end up in Tennessee, yeah, for the Knoxville Festival Big Ears. And then we basically play our way back to DC and then go to Philly. And and then we have another tour in May where we head out and actually do all of those dates too with James. And it's kind of cool that we've lined some of this up to do. James was already booking because it took a lot of time to get this record in order and get it to come out this year. So James had already moved on to booking this year, but he's still doing touring with us. And I think we're trying to figure out what's going to happen at the end of the year. Can we play on the West Coast? Can we go to Australia? That kind of shit with James. We're trying to figure it out. So
Right. I'll try to book the car park for you guys,
all right, we'd appreciate
it. I'll catch you later, man. Just all of the best.
Okay, thanks, Elvar. We'll be in touch.
Cool, man.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, thanks for listening to my talk with Joe Lally of Fugazi, the Messthetics, and Coriky. An awesome guy, as you can hear, one of the greatest bass players of all time. If you listen to those bass lines, those Fugazi bass lines, and the Messthetics, and basically everything he's done, it's on another level, for sure. But I'm Elvar. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back soon with more great talks with more amazing musicians. Take care of each other. All the best.